Salt. A simple mineral, ordinary at first glance, yet powerful beyond measure. From the moment humans first discovered its taste, they understood it was different. Salt was not merely food. It was not merely flavor. It was power. It was medicine. It was wealth. It was something sacred. For thousands of years, salt carried with it a story not only about survival, but about control, secrecy, and forbidden knowledge. Today, we think of salt as something mundane, a shaker on the dining table, a bag at the grocery store, cheap and ordinary. But in truth, salt's hidden history is anything but ordinary. Before refrigeration, before electricity, before modern industry, salt was the single most important preservative in the world. It was the key to survival. Without it, food spoiled, armies starved, and kingdoms fell. With it, civilizations thrived, wars were won, and fortunes were made. It is not an exaggeration to say that salt shaped the destiny of nations. But there is another side to salt, one that has been deliberately hidden, or at least forgotten. Salt was never just about the preservation of food. In nearly every ancient tradition, salt was tied to the preservation of knowledge, of spirit, of energy. It was a shield, a purifier, and a symbol of power. Think about this. Almost every ancient culture, no matter how far apart, placed unusual significance on salt. The Egyptians used it in mummification rituals, believing it preserved the soul as well as the body. The Hebrews offered salt in sacred rituals, binding it to their covenant with the divine. In Japan, salt was scattered to purify spaces and drive away negative energy. Even in tribal societies far removed from the great empires, salt was used in ceremonies and rituals. Why? Why did cultures with no contact all come to the same conclusion that salt was sacred? Was this coincidence? Or did ancient people know something we have forgotten? To them, salt was not only essential for survival, it was proof of a deeper truth. That this simple crystal, drawn from the earth and the sea, contained something more than chemistry. It contained something eternal, something forbidden. Salt's role as a symbol of purity, protection, and power did not fade with time. If anything, its importance only grew. Ancient texts across civilizations mention it in ways that suggest they were speaking about far more than a seasoning for food. They were speaking about a material that connected the physical world with the spiritual. In the Hebrew scriptures, salt was called the salt of the covenant, a phrase that implied permanence, unbreakable loyalty, and divine connection. To eat bread with salt was not only to share a meal, but to seal a bond, something that could not be undone. Even today, in certain cultures, offering bread and salt to a guest is considered the highest form of welcome, carrying echoes of an ancient tradition whose true meaning has been mostly forgotten. The Greeks saw salt as a divine gift, sacred to Poseidon, god of the sea. They linked it to healing, bathing in mineral-rich waters and using salt to cleanse wounds. Meanwhile, in Rome, salt was wealth itself. The word salary comes from the Latin salarium, money paid to soldiers for the purchase of salt. Roman roads, still famous today, were not only military routes, many were salt roads, designed for the movement of this precious resource. Entire cities rose where salt was abundant, and powerful rulers guarded salt mines as if they were vaults of treasure. But the hidden story of salt goes deeper still. In folklore and esoteric traditions, salt became a tool against corruption, decay, and darkness. Medieval Europeans sprinkled salt around thresholds to keep out spirits. Witches were said to lose their powers if they crossed a line of salt. In some traditions, Throwing salt over one's shoulder warded off bad luck by blinding the devil himself. What was it about salt that made it a weapon not just against hunger, but against unseen forces? Was it superstition? Or was it a fragment of knowledge passed down from an older world, knowledge about salt's ability to purify, preserve, and protect on levels we can barely measure today? Even science hints at why salt fascinated the ancients. It is one of the only minerals humans crave instinctively, essential for nerve function and life itself. Without salt, the body dies. With too much, the body suffers. Its balance is delicate, almost mystical. Perhaps ancient people saw in this balance a reflection of the universe itself, a reminder that power must be handled with care. This is where the story begins to take a darker turn. Because whenever something carries both necessity and mystery, it does not remain free for long. Control follows. Restriction follows. And those who understand its hidden power guard it carefully. Salt was no exception. By the Middle Ages, salt had already become more than food, more than ritual. It was a form of domination. Kings and emperors realized that if you controlled salt, you controlled life itself. You could starve your enemies. You could tax your people. And you could build empires from something as simple as a crystal. In France, the notorious Gabelle salt tax grew into one of the most hated policies in history. It was not just a tax, it was a weapon of oppression. Every family was required by law to buy a fixed amount of salt at an inflated price, whether they needed it or not. The poor, who relied on salted food to survive, suffered the most. Smuggling salt became a crime punishable by death, yet entire underground networks formed just to bring salt to the people. This hatred of the Gabelle burned for centuries until it finally helped spark the French Revolution itself. Meanwhile in China, the story was similar. As early as 2,600 years ago, Chinese rulers established salt monopolies, turning them into one of the empire's main sources of income. Dynasties rose and fell on the back of salt revenue. Wars were financed by it. Fortunes were hoarded through it. The people had little choice but to obey, because without salt, life itself was impossible. And yet, amid this economic and political struggle, the spiritual meaning of salt persisted. Folk traditions whispered of salt's hidden power. People carried small pouches of salt for protection. Travelers sprinkled it in the corners of inns to guard against spirits. Farmers used it in rituals to bless the soil. Priests placed it upon altars. To the common people, salt was more than a commodity. It was an invisible shield, something that connected them to forces beyond their understanding. The ruling powers knew this too. It is no coincidence that salt appeared in oaths, blessings, and covenants. To swear upon salt was to make an unbreakable vow. To spill salt was to invite misfortune. Why did these beliefs endure across cultures and generations? Was it because salt simply reminded people of survival? Or was there a deeper truth that salt really does carry a kind of energy, something the ancients knew but science has yet to measure? Even in Christianity, salt is woven into mystery. Jesus called his followers the salt of the earth, a phrase suggesting preservation, purity, and hidden strength. In Catholic rites, holy water is often prepared with salt, transforming an ordinary mineral into a tool of blessing and protection. Once again, we see salt standing at the crossroads of the physical and the spiritual, the everyday and the eternal. By now, a pattern begins to emerge. Salt was never just flavor. It was never just trade. It was a bridge between survival and spirit, between wealth and worship, between the ordinary and the forbidden. And whenever something holds that much power, those who rule do not let it remain free. They seize it. They hide its deeper meaning. They guard its secrets. Salt was no exception. As we step deeper into the hidden story of salt, we find something curious. The more societies depended on it, the more they wove it into their myths and mysteries. Salt became not only a necessity, not only a symbol, but a boundary. A line between the pure and the impure, the safe and the dangerous, the sacred and the profane. In Eastern Europe, old traditions taught that a newborn child must be rubbed with salt to keep away evil spirits. In Africa, salt was used in rites to cleanse a person of negative energies before they began a new life stage. In South America, salt was believed to restore balance between the living and the ancestors. Across the globe, this single mineral appeared again and again in rituals of protection, transition, and transformation. Why salt? Why not some other crystal, or some other mineral? The answer lies partly in what salt is. It dissolves easily, disappears into water, yet retains its power. It can preserve food against decay, yet in excess, it destroys life. Salt is balance. It is paradox. It is something that bridges opposites, life and death, growth and decay, matter and spirit. Secret societies understood this duality. Among alchemists, salt was one of the three great symbols: sulfur, mercury, and salt. Each represented an aspect of existence: soul, spirit, and body. To the alchemist, salt was not just sodium chloride. It was the principle of solidity, of form, of the material vessel that held the mysteries of the spirit. Without salt, nothing endured. Without salt, transformation was incomplete. Freemasons, too, whispered of salt in their rituals, using it as a reminder of purity and incorruptibility. In certain initiation rites, salt was placed upon the tongue, sealing vows with the taste of something eternal. These echoes suggest that even in relatively modern times, the guardians of hidden knowledge saw in salt a key to deeper truths. Salt was no exception. But perhaps the most striking examples come not from secret societies, but from ordinary people. For centuries, households across Europe and Asia placed bowls of salt at the hearths, believing it protected the home. In rural villages, salt was cast into flames to drive away misfortune. Even today, in parts of the world, when someone moves into a new house, the first ritual is to sprinkle salt in the corners. Modern science dismisses this as superstition, but why does this practice endure if it has no power at all? The answer may be that salt truly carries a resonance we cannot yet measure. We know it conducts electricity when dissolved in water. We know it interacts with the nervous system at the most basic level of life. We know it balances fluids, thoughts, and even moods. Could it be that ancient people sensed these effects not with microscopes and machines, but with intuition and experience? And if so, what other properties might salt hold? Properties that were deliberately hidden, dismissed, or forgotten. Because one thing is certain: whenever something offers power to the many, there will always be a few who try to lock it away. Salt's story is a mirror of humanity itself. It gave us life, preserved our food, shaped our rituals, and built our empires. Yet every time its importance was revealed, it was quickly taken, taxed, or hidden. The people sensed its sacred power, but rulers turned it into profit, and secret orders locked away the rest of its meaning. Even today, salt carries echoes of the forbidden. Think of how casually it surrounds us. Always present, always overlooked. Yet across centuries, entire belief systems taught that it was more than a mineral. It was a purifier of spaces, a protector of souls, a preserver of truth. It stood as a line between corruption and purity, between chaos and order. When we spill salt and instinctively toss a pinch over the shoulder, we are not performing a silly superstition. We are carrying out the last trace of an ancient ritual once meant to shield us from unseen harm. When holy water is prepared with salt, when bread and salt are offered to a guest, when farmers scatter salt on the earth before planting, we are seeing fragments of a knowledge too widespread, too consistent, to be mere coincidence. Salt is balance. It is paradox. It nourishes, but it can also destroy. It preserves life, but in excess, it ends it. Perhaps this is why it was chosen as a symbol across the world. It reflects the truth of existence itself. Nothing pure lasts without a vessel. Nothing spiritual survives without form. Salt was the bridge. And perhaps that is why it was hidden. Because anything that bridges two worlds, body and spirit, life and death, matter and mystery, is dangerous to those who seek control. To let the masses understand it fully would be to give them power. So the story of salt is not just about food, or wealth, or empire. It is about forgotten knowledge. Knowledge that once made salt sacred in every corner of the earth. Knowledge that still lingers in our rituals, waiting for us to remember. The next time you see salt on your table, pause. Look closer. What you are holding is not just seasoning. It is the same crystal that preserved kings, sealed covenants, protected homes, and whispered of mysteries we are only beginning to rediscover. Salt was never ordinary. Salt was power. Salt was forbidden.